Hi, just a simple tutorial, an idea in a storyboard of one of my students. I'm trying to do this as simple as possible, just quick and dirty. There are better tutorials explaining in depth, for instance, pyroclusters, but I'm just going to do the simple version. All right, let's click away the picture viewer. This is what we're going to build, and let's just jump right in. New scene, cube, and we're just going to put it on top of the grid. Say you're going to put a floor in, and we're just going to give it a bunch of subdivisions. I will show you why, because first of all, we're going to introduce the bulge deformation. I'm going to plop it into the cube as a child object and just use the bulge on the cube, and when I do this, nothing happens. The blue lines tell me that the bulge is actually doing something, but it's not happening on the cube. So that's just because it doesn't have any subdivisions. 9 out of 10 times it's subdivision, guys. So I'm just going to give it 20, 20, 20 subdivisions. That seems to do the trick. Now I'm going to put on a fillet and make this like a 2, and that just gives the cube a nice soft edge. Let's flick off the bulge, or maybe I can do the bulge animation first. It doesn't really matter because all these animations are going to be crossovers and basically building one animation on top of the other. So we're starting off at frame 0 with a strength of 0. And in 5 frames, so it's very short, it's going to bulge like 25%. And I'm going to give it another keyframe. I'm going to go over to frame 20, and then it's going to settle down to 0 again. And give it another keyframe. Don't forget, time slider first, make the change, give it a keyframe. Alright, so that's the first thing. Now I'm going to make a material and fix that up to the cube and open the material, double click, get rid of the reflectance, and I'm just going to change the color over time. Now I'm at frame 20. I'm going to put it back to frame 0. We're just going to start with a red cube. I actually need to be in here and move this all over to red and say OK. Now, of course, here's another keyframe button. I'll click that, and I got a keyframe at frame 0. And in like 40 frames, am I at 40? Yeah. In 40 frames, it's going to change over to blue. So I'm going to click that color again, and I'm just going to change it over to a nice dark solid blue. Let's say this is solid enough, I guess. Yeah, it looks fine. And I'm going to give it another keyframe. Don't forget, first the time slider, make the change, then push keyframe. Right, so now we got this cube that, what is it doing? Ah, okay, yeah, it's bulging. Which is actually bulging over time and then changing over to blue. All right, so we're going to introduce a particle system, but what happens when it bulges, it should actually shrink a little bit so it has the same volume. The cube should get shorter. Now we already have this parameter set and animated, so I'm just going to right click this parameter and go to expressions and say set driver. Now, don't worry about using espresso because this is the easy bit, the easy way to use espresso. So, over time, we're just going to scale the cube according to the strength of the bulge, and it's going to be scaling over the Y. It's actually going to get shorter, smaller than 1.0. So I'm just going to right click the Y. And I'm just going to go to expressions and say set driven relative. Now it doesn't do very much, but here we have an espresso tag now. If we double click it, we get this espresso editor. It's all set up. The only thing we have to change is the values. Now, the values are basically cooked up in here. So if I click on the range mapper, I get these parameters here, its attributes, and it will say all sorts of things. Now I know that the input lower is 0 because the strength of that bulge is 0%, and it only goes up to 5. Sorry about what's happening in the viewport. It only should be going up to 25. Yeah, but the output is extreme because it's now a scale of 101. That actually should be 0.75 because it should get slightly smaller. So let's see what we got now. Here we go. We get this bulge, and it's actually coming off of the floor because of the pivot point in the center of the cube. Don't know if that's a problem. I'll probably put my particle system in comparison to the original. I'll probably put it a little bit more up over the y-axis. So this is what we got so far. Save this. Just make a save. If there's anything screwy going on, you can always go to the old version. Right, now let's see. We need to introduce a very standard particle system. So in order to do that, we'll just go to Simulate, go to Particles, and put on a classic particle system. I'll just make this cube invisible. Now I know that if I hit the play button, the particles are gonna flow out of this particle emitter, which is square. That's fine in this example, and they're just going to go over the z plus axis. So first thing we're going to do is actually rotate it, and hold down the shift key while you're rotating, and then you get about a 90 degrees. That's good. And let's make this emitter actually twice as big. So we got 100 here and 100 there, and our cube, the base of our cube, is 200 by 200. So let's just change that. Now there's a horizontal and vertical angle. I'll put that at 75. That basically means that it's not going to go straight up. All the particles are going to spread out. So let's see what it does right now. So all the particles are going up. That's fine. And let's say, don't make this a crazy number, by the way. The number of particles, that's in the particle tab of the particle emitter. And it's right now it's 1010. That's actually pretty much okay. The time of emission, it starts at frame 0, and it keeps on putting out particles over 15 frames. That's very short. It's less than a second. So it's actually going to be a fraction of 10 particles. So let's make this a little bit higher. Let's make that 15 too. You don't have to put in crazy numbers. You can go up to 600, which is crazy, but don't go overboard. Right, so we got this. And it's all flowing up and nice and dandy, but it doesn't have the speed. Plus, I want to have a lifetime of 40 frames. No more than that. So after 40 frames, the particles die. They completely disappear. So let's put the speed up to, let's put in a crazy number, 750. And you're just going to jump off my screen now. Like that. Now, this is a little bit too much, and I'm losing the puff of cloud as it is created. So that's not going to help. And a way to fix that is to put in a force that actually dampens the speed. So we're just going to go back to Simulate and go to Particles and use friction. Friction standard is 10. I don't know what that number means, but I know I'm going to have to put it down to 7. Experiment with these parameters, see what it does. Just play back the animation. So for instance, that's nice. Now the particles will come out of the box, it will absolutely go through the box and evaporate and die. Great. So we got that figured out. And let's see, by the way, you can of course start the time of when the particles are actually emitted a little bit later than 0 seconds. 0 frames, sorry. Maybe, we're going to fix that with the look of the particles at the beginning of the animation. Because now we're getting into the tougher part. If you thought espresso was tough, then you're going to have a field trip, because we're going to introduce pyroclusters, which is, it can be pretty tricky, especially with rendering times. So I'm just going to try to do it as cheaply as possible. Here we go. First of all, we go to the menu where we get our materials. We're going to go to shader, and we're first going to introduce a volume tracer. What the hell is a volume tracer? Well, it basically tells you where it has to show the particles. Now, for this, usually you don't have a fixed space, so you want to use the entire space, the world space. Way to fix that is to go over to this menu here where you find the sky and the floor and ask for an environment. Now you don't have to do anything to the environment except attach the tracer to it. This basically says use the entire world to show the pyrocluster particles. Now next we're going to go to create, again to shader. Now we're just going to get the pyrocluster itself. It describes how the particle is going to look. This is already sort of like a puffy, steamy whatever, and that's what we're going to use. Here in the pyrocluster, I'm just going to change the render mode to crispy gas. It's slightly different, and we're just going to attach the pyrocluster itself to the emitter. Now the particles will still show up as little lines, but if I render it, you can tell that it's now puffy white clouds. Right, we have to change the color, we have to change the transparency over time, and the size and all that. So let's see. First of all, we'll open up the pyrocluster itself. Now with the globals, I'm not going to do anything about this because there's actually a different parameter called age, and I'm just going to use that for the color. So I'm just going to first go to globals. The only thing, the density. Now if you have a light background, you have to crank up the density quite a bit. I'm just going to crank it up to 15 again. I don't know what it is with that number. I keep coming up with 15. I'm just going to use flat radius, which is the cheapest way to render the pyroclusters. Right, so we got that fixed, and now we're going to go over to age. This menu tells you what happens to the particles as they get born and when they die. Now I'm just going to say the color mix, and I'm just going to flick that out, because I'm just going to use the color of this menu and not the color in globals. So here we go. It starts off with red, and it ends up with blue. Let's make this blue. Let's make this a little lighter, like this. Right. Now we're just going to make it a little bit heavier on the blue and less on the red. Red is basically only at the beginning. A little bit more on the red, like this. That's nice. Luminosity, yes, it's luminous. And then there's the radius, and we're going to change this because the radius, it already has a radius because it already has a gray value. Now what we're going to do is start this. I'm just adding a new can of paint here just by clicking underneath the bar, and I'm just going to make this into black. So basically it has a size 0. This has a size 1. Now let's see, it's going to grow pretty fast to this gray, and then it's going to puff up to a big fluffy cloud. I just don't see anything with mixed color. I think I should have changed it to white. Let's see if this will help. Still doesn't. I'm just gonna check it when I do need to change it, I guess. Change it to blue. Yeah, that does the trick. Oh, that's the overall color. Sorry, this is the core color. That's the outside color. So I do need to change that age thing. Sorry. I'm just gonna fix that up to a nice cyan sort of blue. Now a little bit more. Right, that's a nice puff of blue. Now over age, and here's the color mix. So it mixes the color of this graph with the one in the globals. So somewhere along the line I have to change it over from black to white. Let's see if I do this correctly. Mix color, let's mix it a lot. Like that. Yeah, let's see. I had a preview somewhere here. Let's see what it does. Let's just test one of these frames. So I'm over here, and let's see what it does. And they're already coming out pretty much blue. And at the end, let's see. Yeah, it's all blue. So I did it correctly. So I'm just going to go back just to show you. I'm starting off with the red. Maybe I should put some more purpley blue in here. The mixed color is mixing it from the base colors in the global to the age color that it has here. Oh shoot, hang on. Let's put it up there. And now let's see, way at the beginning of our animation, we have to play it in order to see the particles. So about here, and it's already going to blue pretty fast. Let's change it one more time. And oh, sorry, I don't need to change that one. I need to change this one. So the mixing color is a little bit more. Hang on, my mouse is putting me through a rough time. Right, now let's see. For instance here, and we'll render it. And I get these nice puffy clouds, a little purpley here. And in the meantime, the cube is changing color as well. So I'll just pause the animation, or sorry, the tutorial, and just make an animation and show it to you. Right, this is the rendered result. I had to change one thing. I first had it correctly, and then I made a change which made it incorrect, so I had to change it back again. I'll show you in a second. But this is the final result. It looks like the cube is actually jumping up a bit and letting go of a fart. I know it's very bold colors, etc., etc., and maybe it's not the effect you're looking for, but try and figure out pyroclusters for yourself in depth. And now I'm just going to show you, to keep this under 20 minutes. In the pyrocluster, I went to age, and I had changed this to black, but we want to use this color bar, so I changed it over to white, just a single color, and that fixed the whole entire problem. Okay, I hope this is helpful, and I hope you keep learning new things about pyroclusters that are not in this tutorial.